Imagine sacrificing everything for the man you love, only for him to hand you divorce papers while you're battling cancer. I gave my all, but lost everything in return. This is my story. They say love comes when you least expect it. For me, it happened in the most ordinary place at work. My name is Tina, and back then, I was just another young woman trying to build a future. Every morning, I walked into the office with files tucked under my arm, a smile on my face, and a heart full of dreams. I never imagined that one of those days would change my life forever. Clement was my coworker, a quiet man with sad eyes. He had lost his wife 2 years earlier in a tragic illness, leaving him alone with his 8-year-old son, Kelly. I often noticed the way he sat at his desk, focused but lonely, as if life had stolen something precious from him. One day, while we worked late on a project, he finally opened up. He told me about his late wife, about Kelly's questions at night, and about the emptiness he felt when he walked into his home. My heart broke for him. I had no husband, no children, but I understood pain, and so I stayed. At first, it was small gestures, sharing lunch, helping him with reports, checking in on Kelly when Clement was too tired. But soon, those small acts grew into something neither of us could ignore. By the time Clement smiled again, by the time he began to laugh at my silly jokes, I realized something. Love had quietly walked into my heart. But if only I knew, that same love would one day crush me. Kelly was only 8 years old when I first met him. A shy little boy with curious eyes and a smile that reminded me so much of Clement's late wife. The first time I visited their home, Kelly clung to his father's shirt, watching me cautiously, as though afraid I might vanish just like his mother had. I didn't plan to become his mother. I was only Clement's friend then. But somehow, life pushed me into the role. I began helping with his homework, cooking his meals, and tucking him into bed when Clement worked late. Kelly soon started calling me Auntie Tina, and each time he said it, my heart melted. Clement noticed too. One evening, after dinner, he whispered, "You don't have to do all this, Tina." I looked at him and replied softly, "But I want to." Kelly deserves love, and you deserve peace. His eyes grew wet, and for the first time, he held my hand. That night, something changed between us. I found myself falling not just for Clement, but for the small family we were building. It was as if fate had handed me a second-hand family and said, "Here, make it whole again." And I tried. With everything in me, I tried. But what I didn't know was that the same love and devotion I gave would later be repaid with betrayal so sharp it would pierce my soul. Life has a way of testing love when you least expect it. Clement and I were happy, at least for a while. Kelly was doing well in school. Clement was becoming himself again, and I felt like I finally had a family of my own. But then, everything changed in one night. Clement had an accident. The phone call came late in the evening. My heart nearly stopped when I heard his name mentioned. I rushed to the hospital and found him lying on the bed with bandages on his legs. The doctor said he would recover, but it would take months of rest. My strong, hard-working Clement suddenly became a man who couldn't move without help. He lost his job soon after. His company said they couldn't keep him, and just like that, the bills piled up: rent, food, school fees for Kelly, all of it stared me in the face. And so, I did what I had to do. I became the provider. I worked extra hours. I skipped meals just to make sure Kelly ate. I borrowed money when my salary wasn't enough. Every night, I collapsed on the bed exhausted. Yet I told myself it was worth it because family meant sacrifice. Clement would often look at me with guilt in his eyes, whispering, "I'm sorry for putting you through this." I always smiled and said, "Don't worry, love, we'll get through it together." But deep inside, I didn't know I was laying the foundation for a betrayal so painful that even my sacrifices would one day be forgotten. After months of sleepless nights and endless sacrifices, Clement finally began to heal. The doctors declared him fit to return to normal life, and I couldn't stop the tears of relief that rolled down my cheeks. I thought our storm was ending, that brighter days were waiting for us. But even with his recovery, finding a job was not easy. He went for interview after interview, only to come home with disappointment written all over his face. I knew he was a good man, a capable man, but life wasn't giving him a chance. One evening, I made a call to my uncle, who owned a construction company. I pleaded with him to help Clement, to give him something, anything that would restore his dignity. By God's grace, my uncle agreed. He hired Clement as a manager, and for the first time in a long while, I saw joy return to Clement's eyes. We celebrated with Kelly that night over a simple meal of rice and stew. Clement held my hand across the table and whispered, "You saved me, Tina. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." My heart swelled. At that moment, I believed love had triumphed. Bills were paid, Kelly's school fees were never late, and we even began to talk about building a future together. I thought my suffering had not been in vain, that love and patience had finally given me a reward. But happiness, I would later learn, is a fragile thing. Behind the smile of fate, tragedy was quietly waiting for me. Clement's new job brought light back into our lives. He walked with confidence again. Kelly smiled more often, and for the first time, I felt the heavy load on my shoulders lighten. It was during one of those peaceful evenings, while we sat on the balcony watching Kelly play, that Clement turned to me with trembling hands. "Tina," he whispered, holding out a small ring. "You have carried me through storms I thought would drown me. You became a mother to Kelly, a rock for me, and a reason to believe in love again. Will you be my wife?" Tears blurred my eyes as I nodded, unable to speak. That night, I felt chosen not just as Clement's wife, but as Kelly's mother. The wedding was simple, nothing extravagant, but it was filled with laughter and warmth. Kelly wore a small suit and walked proudly by Clement's side. My family danced, my friends cheered, and Clement held me close all through the ceremony, promising me forever. From that day on, I bore a new name, Mrs. Clement. I wore it with pride, believing I had finally stepped into a life of stability and love. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. Just when I thought I had everything, my body began whispering signs of a storm I could not escape. Weight loss, fatigue, and a strange pain that refused to go away. At first, I ignored it. After all, I had endured worse. But little did I know that silent sickness would strip me of everything, including the man I called husband. Marriage felt like a dream at first. I woke up every morning beside Clement, cooked breakfast for Kelly, and carried the name wife with pride. I thought my battles were over. I thought my sacrifices had finally given me peace. But then, my body began to change. At first, it was little things, constant tiredness, headaches, and nights when I couldn't sleep, no matter how hard I tried. I brushed it off, thinking it was just stress from work and managing the home. Then the weight started to drop. My dresses hung loosely on my body, and friends began asking if I was on a diet. I forced a smile, but inside, I knew something was wrong. Soon after, I noticed strands of my hair falling onto my pillow every morning. I would gather them in my hands, hide them from Clement, and tell myself it was nothing. One evening, while serving dinner, my body gave up. I collapsed on the kitchen floor. Kelly's frightened voice echoed through the house as Clement carried me to the car and rushed me to the hospital. The test felt endless needles, scans, doctors whispering in low tones. Days later, the doctor walked into my ward with a grave look. He sat by my bed, took a deep breath, and spoke the word that froze my blood. "Mrs. Clement, you have cancer." The walls of the hospital room seemed to close in on me. My hands trembled. My heart stopped. Cancer? Me? At that moment, I thought my life and my marriage was over. The day the doctor said cancer, my world collapsed. I thought Clement would hold my hand and tell me everything would be fine. I thought he would stay by my side the way I had stayed by his when life crippled him. but I was wrong. At first, Clement seemed supportive. He came with me to one or two appointments, but soon the excuses began. Work is too demanding. I'll come tomorrow. I'll call you later. Days turned into weeks, and the hospital bed became my companion. My family came often, bringing food and prayers, but the man I called husband was missing. I tried calling him, sometimes in the middle of the night when the pain was unbearable. My calls rang unanswered. Other times, he picked but quickly ended the conversation, saying, "I'm busy, Tina. I'll call you back." He never did. Then the whispers started. My friends who came to visit me mentioned seeing him at clubs, drinking with friends, even laughing with other women. My heart broke each time, but I refused to believe. Not my Clement, not the man I gave everything for. But one evening, Kelly came to see me, his small hands trembling as he spoke. "Mom," he whispered, "Dad doesn't come home much anymore." His eyes filled with tears. My own heart shattered into pieces I couldn't mend. As I lay in that cold hospital bed, weak, bald, and broken, one truth burned into my soul. Clement was living his life while I was slowly dying. Every night, I prayed Clement would walk into my hospital room, hold my hand, and tell me he was sorry. But instead of coming closer, he drifted farther away until one day he was gone completely. I heard the news not from him, but from neighbors. Clement had moved out of the home we shared, and worse, he was not alone. There was a new woman in his life, Sandra. Sandra was bold, loud, and heartless. She had no interest in me, nor in the sacrifices I had made. Her only interest was in Clement and the little money he earned. And to make matters worse, she made one demand: Kelly could not live with them. When the news reached me, my body shook with grief. My stepson, my little boy, the child I had loved and raised as my own, was abandoned just like me. Clement left him behind in the very house where our love story began. From my hospital bed, I tried to be strong for Kelly. He visited me, tears staining his cheeks as he whispered, "Mom, Dad doesn't want me with them." I held his hand, though mine was weak, and told him, "You will always have me, Kelly, always." But deep down, I knew the truth. My body was failing, my marriage was gone, and the man I loved had replaced me with another woman. I will never forget the day the nurse handed me an envelope with my name on it. I was lying weak on the hospital bed, the drip still running into my veins. My hands trembled as I tore it open, praying it was a note of encouragement from Clement. But what I pulled out were not words of love, they were divorce papers. For a long moment, I stared at the bold letters, unable to breathe. My husband, the man I nursed through his accident, the man I begged my uncle to employ, the man I gave everything to, wanted to leave me while I was battling for my life. Tears spilled down my face, soaking the papers. I thought of our wedding day, of Kelly calling me mom, of all the nights I stayed awake to feed and comfort them both. And now, when I was at my weakest, Clement wanted freedom. I tried to dial his number. He didn't pick. Hours later, he sent one short message. "It's better this way. I can't do this anymore." Better? For who? Certainly not for me. Not for the boy left behind. Not for the woman who had given up everything just to keep a family together. That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked. Cancer was already eating my body, but Clement's divorce shattered what was left of my soul. After the divorce papers arrived, something inside me broke beyond repair. I tried to stay strong for myself and Kelly, but even he could see the light fading from my eyes. The cancer was eating me alive. My body was frail, my hair completely gone, my reflection in the mirror unrecognizable. Each day in the hospital felt longer than the last. I watched other patients have their loved ones by their side, husbands holding wives, children praying for mothers, but my own husband was nowhere. Clement was out living, laughing, and parading Sandra. while I was dying alone in a cold hospital room. The pain was unbearable, but the loneliness hurt even more. At night, when the ward was silent, I whispered prayers, asking God to forgive Clement, to protect Kelly, and to give me peace. I no longer prayed for healing. I prayed for rest. One evening, Kelly came to see me. He held my hand tightly and whispered, "Mom, please don't leave me." His tears fell onto my arm, and though my strength was gone, I forced a smile. "I'll always be with you, Kelly. Even if you can't see me, I'll always love you." And so, my body gave up. I closed my eyes in that cold hospital bed, abandoned by the man I loved, and held only by the son who wasn't even mine by blood. I thought my story ended with death, but I was wrong. Because from beyond the grave, I still see everything. I see Clement, I see Sandra, and I see how life is about to repay every tear I cried. This is not the end of my story. This is only the beginning of their downfall.